Welcome to Psychology of the Daf. We are in Gemara Pesachim, Daf Gimel. This Gemara raises an interesting point about the value of delicate and appropriate language. And the Gemara notes that the Torah goes out of its way to call an animal in Bereshis 7, chapter 7, verse 8, a nena tahora, an animal that is not pure, as opposed to simply saying that the animal is tameh, that the animal is impure. So the Gemara notices this and points out from here you see how important it is to choose a more appropriate, a more refined language. And what's interesting about this is then the Gemara raises a question, but many times in the Torah it actually uses the word tameh explicitly. And the Gemara answers no. Actually, the rule is that one should teach in a concise manner. Anything that interferes in the understanding and in the brevity should be said explicitly, even if it's less refined. However, if it's of equal length, then one should choose a more refined language. And even though that particular verse that we quoted originally from Genesis 7:8, that verse was just to teach us the concept. But in reality, one should choose the more brief language instead of the more appropriate, more delicate language. And this brings us to the idea of sex education with children. Many people are afraid to teach their children about sexuality or speak in so many euphemisms that children are unable to understand it. And I use the word child loosely because there are discussions that one should have with teenagers as well, based on their developmental level, based on the community they belong to, based on how much they're aware of the world. But these conversations are extremely important. And do not think for a moment that this is considered a violation of modesty, because you cannot go a chapter in Chumash nor a chapter in Gemara without coming across highly sexually explicit material. And you really cannot understand those Gemaras properly or those teachings in the Torah properly without understanding the mechanics of sexuality. And in order to teach Torah, one is supposed to teach Torah properly without any type of emendation or censoring. We see from here, we saw from this Gemara, that in order to teach properly, one should choose the briefest and clearest language, even if it is less polite. If you want to teach a child about masturbation, which you need to do because there are all kinds of Torah requirements, and they require a great deal of nuance to know how to employ those requirements correctly without setting unrealistic expectations and guilt. If you want to talk about that, you need to be very specific. You can't just say something like down there. That's not going to help anybody. That's not going to help a child. You're taking a teenager who is surging with hormones and not giving them appropriate and detailed direction and guidance, again, based on your understanding of what's proper and appropriate and healthy and correct according to the Torah. If you cannot give very detailed instruction to your child, that's like giving your child a key to a 500 horsepower sports car and saying to him, just follow this general advice, be safe, just be safe, don't let anybody get killed. That's not instruction. That is not safe instruction. So too when it comes to sexual instruction. Now some people feel, well, maybe if I talk about things, I'll put ideas into my children's head. Maybe you will. I can't promise you that you won't, but this is 2020 and there are platforms online that we adults don't even know about. This is not just the old days like pornography or Facebook. By the way, does anybody remember MySpace? Doesn't even exist anymore. But these are not the old days. We wish it was the old days. Do you know that there are apps where two strangers of any age can anonymously connect to each other by video any time of day and night randomly? So teenagers can get online, children could get online, push a button, and be connected with somebody anywhere else in the world by video, randomly and anonymously. And please don't tell me that yeshiva boys and Beis Yaakov girls are not doing this, because they are yeshiva boys and Beis Yaakov girls in mine and my wife's offices that are doing this. So it's just whether it's happening a lot or a little, these are extremely serious matters that parents need to take in mind. Now, some people feel that the whole notion of discussing sexual matters is forbidden because, according to the Torah, one is supposed to stay away from arousing thoughts that are unnecessary, unless they're within the confines of a committed, marriage relationship. But there's an Ezra Kodesh that you can find in Shulchan Aruch 23.3, which explains in great detail that when one is studying Torah and one comes across sexually explicit material in the Torah, as long as they're doing it sincerely and they're not doing it out of lust, it's not considered a problem. Of course, this is common sense because it would be impossible to learn Torah without it, because there's just way too much, especially certain Gemaras. There's way too much that you can't possibly understand any alternative, but sometimes we need people to tell us the obvious because otherwise we'd be too afraid to do so.